My name is KJ Harrowick. I am a graphic artist. I'm a web developer and designer. I'm also a science fantasy author. I've been working with websites and marketing and graphic art for over 15 years. I've worked with huge companies, people like Philips, people like Darigold. I've worked with All Recipes, but I've also worked with small independent authors. And honestly, I love having a broad, either working with teams or working with individuals. It's all just so fantastic. I love seeing people's visions and kind of helping them bring that into reality. So one of the things that I did when I was asked to do this presentation is I had to think about how I wanted to give you guys a perspective on what it is, what's from a designer's point of view. What do we do? What do we look at? How do we talk to an author or, somebody who needs a piece of art and bring that vision to life, but also do it in such a way that one, they can market it well, two, it really fits in that niche or whatever industry that they're in. So what I did is I spoke with a friend of mine, Ari Augustine, and I asked her, I said, hey, real or fake cover? I'm going to design one. You just tell me what you want. So what I did is I went ahead and threw I have this document that I work with and I give to all of my clients when they're asking for, cover art. And it asks things like, what's the title of your book? What's the genre? What market are we looking at? And what colors do you love? What colors do you hate? Is there any styles that you like? And I really want to get a very in-depth, broad sense of what they're looking for. It's kind of a way to crack open the author's head. And then what I do is I give them homework. I ask them, okay, get on Pinterest or scour the web, and I want you to send me all the images and fonts and colors and things that really stand out as, I know some artist in, Bulgaria created this, but this really captures the vibe of this character or this tone. So again, it helps me to really see what their vision is from their perspective. So I did that with Ari and she sent me all the information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a video up now. And you guys can watch me from step one to the end, and you can ask me questions along the way. Don't hesitate to ask anything. So let me share my screen. Like I said, don't hesitate to ask any questions you have. I might point some things out along the way, or you guys can just kind of see what goes into designing a video or designing a cover. I need more coffee, obviously. So this part here is the document. And you can see the Pinterest that she sort of came up with. And then this section here is what I do is I get the trim and cover size, the exact specifications, and I lay it out in a huge file. And I want to get, all the white space out of there. I got to set up all the borders and make sure that if there's like text that it doesn't end up on the bottom half of the spine and then folding over to the back, because that looks really messy. You want everything to be really clean and laid out well. For this particular project, we assumed that this book would be in hardcover and paperback. So I went ahead and built the trim size and all the borders around full inner and outer flaps. Just a note on the images that you see me pulling in. What I do is I always use royalty-free stock. I also have some stock that I do license. And so when I work doing a blend, I really like to blend like something that's concept or idealized, and then some stock photos to do, you know, some of the trickier stuff that maybe I can't do by hand, but to blend them all into sort of a cohesive image. But with the photos that I use, like the little leaves you saw, those are actually licensed photos. So even though I change them and manipulate them and you don't see any hint of the original by the end, they are all licensed as I get started. Yes, am I good with questions? Yeah, if you guys have questions, you can type them in the chat or unmute and just ask me. Happy to answer anything. Question from Alexis, is this Photoshop? Yes, it sure is. I start with a base layer, and actually this particular file got so big that I had to move it up to the large file Photoshop as I saved it, and it takes forever to close. Question from Alexis, how long does it take to create a draft cover? The draft cover is usually, if you guys watch the other book cover panel, sometimes it's a sketch, but usually what I do is I take a couple photos and I just sort of like, here's a background, or here's two backgrounds merged together to get the landscape that we're looking for. Here's the stock model. And I'll just do really rough cuts to where it looks bad. I mean, really bad. It looks like a pencil drawing, and kind of put them together. And I'll send a couple of those mocks to my client. So those can take, sometimes I can do them in an hour if the vision is really clear. Sometimes it takes a couple hours, but no more than a day, because it's just a base. For this particular one, I think about the point we're at now, I was probably 6 to 8 hours into this. Hopefully that answers. And question from Ami, can you tell us a bit about how you make your choices in the design, like blurring the background or the way block along the bottom? That, that's a tricky one to answer because it always changes. As I go into a project, I have a vision for what I want to see, and what the client wants to see, what the industry kind of, like when you look at genre, a romance cover will be very different from a fantasy cover. So I will take that into consideration. Who's your market? And as I start building the design, sometimes I can see things and sometimes I get hyper focused, but really what I try to do is how can I convey this image in my head and at least build the base for it, or get, yeah, it's just really hard to determine. I can't really say there's one thing or another. So here, like you can tell, I just needed a shadow to really offset the light on the left-hand side. So that's where that decision came in. You know, it's like, okay, if we've got light coming from this way, this pillar is going to have a shadow on the other side to show the direction, light direction. So, but like the block along the bottom, I put that there and then I ended up tossing it because it just didn't feel right. Question from Diana: is there anything you wish more authors would do and or not do when filling out a cover brief? No, honestly, you know, the clients that I've been really fortunate enough to work with, they fill it out fully and they're very clear about what they want. You know, in the other panel, they talked about micromanaging. That is one thing that's can be tough, is when somebody's like, okay, they want to control every little pixel and piece of your artwork. And so it can be tough to go, okay, I know you really want this, and here's the industry standard. So how do we make these two come together? So, but yeah, otherwise, I don't know. I can't think of anything really. Thank you too, Diana. This was the section I struggled with a little bit. I kept trying to get those. I knew what I wanted for those lines. I wanted it to have this like jagged, empty stone appearance, but no matter how I tried to manipulate the image or the filter, it just wouldn't budge those lines from straight up and down. So I think I ended up tossing them later. Alexis, you want to see someone wild? There's an artist by the name of Jordan Grimmer, and he does all of this with, and it's incredible. He's actually been a huge inspiration for how I do my concept art. So definitely check him out on YouTube as well. Question from Tiffany: can you talk about how certain elements in the cover help attract readers? What kind of elements pull the eye? Excellent question. That's going to be different for every genre. So when you're looking for a romance cover, especially let's say contemporary romance, you know, one of the things you're looking for is it's simple and it's clean. Hang on just a second. Okay, back to the question. So it's simple, it's clean, but one thing a romance cover always has, or usually has, is they have a couple on the cover or a person, you know, the bare-chested man. And that becomes a very huge focal point for readers. So when designers or publishers actually put those two together on the cover, they're going, okay, we are trying to capture or pull the attention of this particular audience. And then apart from them, then you have the surrounding sort of filters or landscape or however the artist wants to do it. So then you'll have a play of light and color. Sometimes you'll have the background a little bit duller so that the couple really pops out. And then when you get into fantasy covers, it becomes a little bit different. You don't have as many of the cleaner lines. You know, we start blending photos, we start adding in clouds and blurring things a little bit. And what we're trying to do is sort of create a focal piece for the front cover. We want readers to see something there that's really intriguing. Maybe it's part of the landscape, maybe it's a weird building, or maybe it's just a play of color. Some of them just simply take two different colors and they'll really manipulate them with little icons and font and move it around, and they'll make these incredible covers. But that's the big thing, is we want to have that focal point, the one that pulls the eye. And then as you look longer at the cover and you turn it to the spine and the back and these other places, then you start seeing all these little plays of light and shadow, plays of color. And you want it to look like, okay, I see this focal point, but the more I look at this, I can see other little pieces. Here's a hidden area here. Here's a light path here. Where does it go? You know, so you want the cover to not just focus on the front, but to really give people a long-lasting look at this piece of art and start dipping their imagination into where the story could really take them. I hope that answers your question. Okay, Ami, my name, oh, sorry, Amy, I'm so sorry. I had a friend growing up with that exact spelling that was named Ami. My apologies. Okay, so Amy asked, have you ever had to have a hard conversation with an author who might want something that just doesn't work? Do you make the cover they want, or do you try to guide them in the right direction? Will you say no to someone that won't budge, even if it's just flat out wrong? First of all, no, I will never say some flat out no to somebody. At the end of the day, if that's what they want, whether it's going to sell or not, that's what they want. My goal is to have each author walk away going, this is my cover, this is my book, this is something I am so happy with that I want to shout it to everybody. Because really that energy and that excitement is going to go a lot further than maybe an industry standard cover that they just really don't like. So that's the first thing. Have I had difficulties with working with a client? I've had a few where we've had some struggles kind of in the middle. One of the things that's really difficult is when an author has a vision and you start pulling that vision and you both are like, wait a minute, this isn't working. You know, so the concept isn't right, something feels off, and you both can feel it, but you feel it in different ways. And then it's, you know, and then so you try again, maybe we do another concept and just kind of see, maybe is this one going in the right direction? I had one particular client a few years ago, and we really struggled the first half of the project. We were really trying to find that concept, and I could see what they wanted. They could see what I was trying to do, but it was just never, it was never right. There was something that felt off about it. So we even talked about, okay, do we try one more, you know, design? Do we just call it quits? You know, and it was one of those instances where we were both like, what do we do? Maybe we're just not a fit. Maybe we're not working together right. So we actually had a long-handed conversation, and I said, okay, let's try one more, just a mock, you know, nothing fancy. I said, if this doesn't work, then maybe we need to, you know, we do need to go ahead and do that split. And we talked a lot. And then I did another one, and all of a sudden it was like, boom, that was the one. I mean, they were just over the moon, and it wasn't what they originally wanted, but it was, you know, sometimes you can see or not see and look at stuff and go, that's exactly what I wanted, but it doesn't feel right. So yeah, so we've had complications, and honestly, if just talking to the client and saying, hey, what are you feeling? What's going on? I know this is what you wanted, but what are you seeing now? And a lot of times, as long as you give that really candid feedback, then the artist can say, okay, I have a clearer direction. Let's talk about these little details, or you can decide to just, you know, maybe it's just not a good fit for whatever reason. So, but yeah, and I've had clients pay me for designs and then, or commission me for designs and then never pay. So, but those are very rare and few and far between. So circling back to the question of, do I ever just flat out say no? There are instances where I never say flat out, no, I won't do what you want to a client, but there are instances where I've been approached by an author and they want a particular artistic style, maybe like an oil painting feel or a particular type of landscape. And I can talk to them and go, okay, I would love to take on this challenge, but I don't have the appropriate skill set to pull that off in the way that you need it to be done to really give your book the best shot. I have had a few of those, and I say, you might want to talk to this artist or this artist, and I'll kind of try to steer them in the right direction of someone who can do the work that they need or has the skill set to really accomplish it. Because even doing this, I've got my limitations. There's stuff that I can't do, execute. But every day is like a learning experience. So the neat thing about Write About here in the video is when we start seeing more of the personality of this concept art trying to come out. In the beginning, it was quite different, but now we've got some mountains in the background. I've sort of settled how the pillars are going to look. And now it's trying to add depth, add sort of some light and shadow to the landscape, and really figure out a way to make everything cohesive, but also cohesive in a way where you feel like you could step through the screen onto this artwork and this landscape and go, okay, this is real. I could walk through it and I could touch light and shadow places. I can feel stone. There's, water patches over here. And it kind of, that's what you want. You want somebody, a reader, to feel like they could step into this world. Alex asks, what happens when a client doesn't pay? So the way that I work is once we settle on the exact project that we want, and we'll talk about, the work scope and expectations from both sides, is I require half down for the project, and then the other half is due upon delivery of assets. So they're giving me money at the beginning to say, I'm serious about this. I really want this work. So what we'll do is we'll work back and forth. Sometimes there's a lot of emails, sometimes there's only a few. And I bring my clients into each step of the way. So when I first get a concept, or I'll put a couple concepts together and I'll say, okay, these are the ways I think we're going. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. Tell me if they're both trash and we need to kind of go a different direction. So they get to see that first initial idea and then they get to approve it. And from there we move forward, and then I'll send them something that's, a lot denser and more up to standard, but it's not done yet. I haven't done all the filtering and playing. We'll talk, we'll approve, once it's approved, we move forward. So my clients get to be part of the process really from beginning to end. They get to have a lot of input. They get to say, yes, this is right. No, this is wrong. And then if we get to the very end, so by the time we get to the end, usually they've had so much input and they know exactly what they're getting that they're willing to, they'll go ahead and pay the rest. So at the end of the project, they pay the final bill and I send them the images. I send them, all the print covers. I send it cut for digital. I'll give them some 3Ds of their images so that way they can use them for marketing materials. But if we get to the end and all of a sudden the client's like, I really don't like this, I've just decided I don't want anything anymore, they can walk away. They've still paid for me to do that part of the project, but they're not paying the rest to get the final product, so they don't get it. Now there are instances too, because I work with indie authors where they are on a particular budget. So I'm like, okay, this is the full price. Tell me if you have any struggles or you need to set up some kind of payment arrangement. And I'm absolutely okay with that. I've had, a few clients who just pay me like $100 a month as they can, because that's really all they can afford at that moment in time. But as their career builds, things will change. But again, my goal is by the end of us working together, you're happy to pay, you're happy to take those images, and you want to go scream about them from every mountaintop. That's really the goal. I'm dying to use Lightroom. I haven't had a chance to use it yet. I am also dying to use, oh, what's the image motion one? I can't remember the name of it. So I have to admit, at this point, I was getting a little frustrated with the mountains in the back, but I was really, really happy about the guy falling off the tower. I can't remember if I kept him or dropped him in the final piece. I think I may have kept him. But the world that, you know, Ari really wanted to build for this story was very dark, very, a place where people don't have a lot of wiggle room outside of survival. So she wanted it to be a very dark and horrific world. So I felt like this guy falling off kind of really gave a big, a big image of that. Okay, I get it. So to answer your question, Alex, no, it wasn't Premiere. It was Adobe After Effects. That's the one I was really, I would love to get someday, because it allows you to do sort of those little bit of video, but more like action shots, you know, but with some of the action going around maybe a focal piece. Okay, Alex asks, how does it work when you use paid for images versus free use? Pretty much the same. If you, I don't know if you guys have seen that. So both images they're licensed. So free images, you know, there's commercial free. It's basically, you have, you know, anybody can use the license to put them on covers, on t-shirts, but as they are. That's really what it is. And then with licensed photos, but it gives me a broader pool, because sometimes I really am looking for a specific look or a portion of an image, and I'm only going to find it with something licensed. So, but with free images, a lot of times they're cast offs. A photographer has taken 1,000 pictures, they can sell 400 of them. They don't know what to do with the other 6, so they can put them up as free stock somewhere and sort of get their name out there. And again, it's licensed commercially for free, but you can take those, and they're not great photos. They're not terrible, but they're not, they're not the best, but you can still take them and go, okay, this one has a really nice texture that I want to try to use. So you can put it over something, kind of clip it so it only wraps around that object, and then play with how it sort of blends into it. Sometimes you can use it, you'll see like these little color splashes for backgrounds. And so you sort of put them in the background, and then you can tone them down. You can sort of play with the coloring. You can use filters to play with blurring and motion, and just sort of, it helps add a little bit more depth to the background that may look like something else completely. If you've got a dark forest, but all of a sudden it's got these little tinges of yellows and greens and blues along the trunks, it gives a really nice perspective. So you'll notice at this point in the image, there's still some hard edges that are showing through as I play with the clouds. There's a dusty landscape that's turned, starts looking a little bit more like grass and water. But there's, with the skulls underneath, it's all, you get this mossy feel, and it still looks really devastating. So I really like the grim, dark feel of that. How it's got this landscape that looks like it could be really nice, but as you get below the surface, you start to see that it's just crawling with death. One of the things that happens around this point too is I start thinking about, okay, this is one full image, but how are the pieces laying out on each section? So, on the spine, there's not a lot. There's just some nice texture and a little bit of landscape, which is perfect because you're going to, put text and possibly a publisher icon over the spine. So you sort of want to keep that, I wouldn't say a free space, but don't try to put one of your focal images in there. The focal images really should be on the front cover. So you've got this, nice large tower here. It still needs some work. It's got people around it, somebody falling. So it's a nice centerpiece for this darkness that we really wanted to create. But then as you look at the back cover, you've got this nice pillar in the distance, but you still have a little bit of flat space. And you can really use that to your advantage when you start putting on the back cover information, the blurb, if there's a little pitch title or a pitch line. And then, of course, always making room in the bottom right corner for that barcode. You can see here, I'm starting to get frustrated with the flatness in the background. So I'm trying to play with light and shadow and really pull and push some of those elements. So we get kind of a darker hillside, and next to it, there's a little bit of light coming through and kind of highlighting some of those pieces. All right, we've come to the point where it's font. You've probably heard a lot of designers say that a font will make or break your cover. It absolutely will. I have seen covers with beautiful artwork, and I look at the font and I'm going, okay, now this looks like somebody slapped it on that kind of really didn't know what they were quite doing, because it's one that's maybe not really up to industry standard, and there's thousands of fonts out there. But when you find the right font for a cover, all of a sudden it makes that image just look absolutely fantastic. It brings it to life. It gives the cover personality. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, there we go. That's the one. And, you know, and one thing you want to really look at with fonts too is, again, you've got to license them. So Google Fonts has tons of commercial free licenses. It's wonderful. I would, if you're ever designing your own or working with a cover artist, you really want to kind of have that in mind. You know, are we paying for a license for the font, or are we, you know, is it a free font? So like I said, Google has tons, but if you find one you really, really like, definitely look at how it's licensed. There are some that, you know, they'll license only for desktop use, which means you can only play with that font with your personal graphics or to design like a background for your computer. There are others that allow them to be in logos, but not as a font on a website. And by a font, I mean you can't use it as part of the copy or part of the text. There are licenses that allow you to only sell 500 copies of whatever it is you're using it in. So that's the one thing when you're working with images and fonts, you really want to look at, okay, am I going to get myself in trouble? What does it say as far as like the licensing for this particular font? Can I use it inside the book, or can I only use it on the cover? And there are some that actually say you can use it on the cover, but you can't use it inside. So I stick with free fonts as much as I can, because honestly, simple is better sometimes. As you can see here, I still hadn't quite gotten the vibe of it yet. And as you can see, I was probably focused on something else or thinking of, okay, what's wrong? What's right? How do I fix this? Because it's still, the font wasn't quite right yet. And the interesting thing is the client that I worked with on this particular project, by the time I sent it to her, she loved it, but hated it. And what I hadn't realized is she absolutely loathes the color yellow. And so it's something I've started adding into the documents that I send my clients is there a color you absolutely hate? And I've run into this before where I built this beautiful, gorgeous cover. And then all of a sudden she's like, I hate it. I hate orange. Don't ever put orange in it again. I'm like, uh-oh. So we had to go back and like kind of refilter and recolor a lot of stuff. And you'll see later that I ended up having to do the same thing for this cover. So. So this little circle thing, the loading circle, this file at this point has gotten so big that it's taking, my computer has a lot of space to work with these files, but it really bogged it down. Alex asked, do you do this all with a keyboard and mouse, or do you mostly use a drawing tablet? You know, I want a drawing tablet. I actually have a tablet that I could use, but I don't have the programs loaded on it that I need. So right now I do all of this with keyboard and mouse. And I have two screens. I have my laptop and then I have an attached screen. So I get dual what's going on, because I needed a huge screen to really see what I was doing. My laptop is great, but its screen is a little small. So I'm always like, you know, for a while there, I was getting so close and my eyes were hurting. And I'm like, okay, I need something big where I can sit back, look at the whole, and still see all the little pieces. So yeah, just keyboard and mouse. That's how I do all of this. So if you look over on the very left-hand flap, there's this little rock formation above the tower where a couple of the pieces ended up with like almost like a blue crystal glow in them. I think that's my favorite part of this whole cover, just that one little piece. So another thing I see a lot, and you can tell that I'm trying to work around it here, is text on a cover. Sometimes it's too close in tone to the cover where it doesn't really pop out. Sometimes it's too bright and it really stands apart. So right here on the back, I was really struggling with, okay, you know, right around tail prosciutto in the third line, it starts getting lost in the grassy background. So I worked on it, but I still wasn't completely happy with it, because it blended a little too much. And this tower back here was really getting hidden by the text because it was kind of in the middle. I kept wondering if I needed to move it or. So this is the point where I think I'd gotten feedback and I was told yellow is an absolute no. So I had to go back and kind of go, okay, how do I get rid of the yellow? How do I make this pop even more? And then how do I recolor all of that text to stand out? So one of the tricks I did for this is because I really liked the yellowy, mossy, overgrowth looking skulls at the bottom. And I kind of wanted to keep that, but it just didn't work for the client. So my next thought was, how do I really bleach these out, make them look arid but underwater and still keep that icky effect? So as you can see here, I bleached it out a little bit. So now it doesn't look quite as rotten, but it's still, you can see that texture and that age and just kind of that ickiness clinging to the skulls. At this point, you can see one of the struggles I was having was getting rid of that yellow. How do I recolor this text to where it pops, but also feels like a part of this image? And I was kind of playing with, you know, some strokes and blurring and different colors and trying to find that nice coloring and edge that just really made it stand out. I really love doing that sort of a reflective water effect with the cover or with the title. I thought it gave the front cover just a tiny bit more personality than just the cover title itself. And just so if any of you are curious, this book does not exist, unfortunately. I wasn't sure what Ari would give me, but she just decided, okay, let's just make this completely new concept and see where it goes. So now that she has a cover, we have to all really harass her to try and write it. So this image I'm using right here was just kind of a placeholder. Ari wanted she kind of gave me like a fake pub name or a real one. I don't know. She may use it in the future, but she didn't have a logo for it yet because it's not established. It doesn't exist. So I think it's called Moth Moon, but I was like, okay, how do I put that into like a logo without designing a full logo? So that's where I found this image. It just kind of gave a quick snapshot, but it was something simple that I could just add as part of the cover to say, yes, this is coming from this pub. So in the future, though, if she does write this book and decides to put it out, then, she has a base to start with, or she can say, yeah, get that thing out of here. Here's the real logo. Oh, Alex, thank you. That's really nice. Alex said, not even knowing what the story is about, I would pick this up just to be able to have that cover displayed on one of my bookcases. Me too. Matter of fact, I've been considering taking this image and selling it as a piece of art. So might see that in the future. Amy asked, can you talk a bit about what might be some red flags in pricing when working with a cover artist? That is an excellent, excellent question. So in the other panel yesterday, from the author perspective of working with a designer, they talked about prices. And the truth is that prices can really range with cover art from $100 to $30,000, which is, to me, it's insane. But when you're spending $30,000 on a cover, you're doing like a movie poster or, Marvel Universe, Lord of the Rings universe. These are really high-end illustrators that can literally draw a portrait that looks like a photo. They're incredible. You can find them on ArtStation. Some of these guys are just unbelievable. If you're traditional, you will work with a cover artist, but they will have one in-house or someone that they use. And what they pay for it will actually come out of their percentage. So again, you're not paying for it, but hopefully your publisher will at least let you have a little bit of insight or be part of the process. Some do, some just send you the cover and say, here's your cover, like it or don't. So as an indie and working with small press, a lot of times the covers can really range. So if you have a designer you're using and what they do is they take just a stock image and just put text on it, for your title, and then that's it. Honestly, probably $100 to $150, and not because they're not good artists, it's because they're taking as little, they're just doing the very basics of what it costs to actually get that cover up. So think I don't want to pick on romance, but think like a romance cover. You know, stock image of a couple on there. Sometimes you'll change the background, you put the title on, add a little bit of lighting, you're good to go. That's your audience. That's what they love. Something simple, something that says, here is the couple. Let's get spicy. As you move into different genres, you can expect to pay a little bit more. So one of the things that, you know, you can pay, if you're paying around $400 to $500, you can expect a little bit more high-end graphic art. Something like photo blends, where they're taking 5 and 6 photos and they're blending them together and really retouching, coloring, and adding this cohesive depth that really makes the image yours. And then, you know, as you start getting from graphic art into deeper into illustration and especially concept art, you're looking at a couple $1,000s just for the artwork. And then usually you have to cut it yourself. But artists are really different. You know, everybody has different prices. The price sometimes is based on genre. The price can be based on their skill sets. An illustrator is might charge more than somebody who just throws some stock photos together. It also depends on who you've worked with. You know, if you come from a high-end school and you've worked doing like movie posters and video game posters, and you've done all the artwork for big stuff like that, where you've worked on team project and worked hourly, you're probably going to charge more because you've got that industry skill set that makes you unique. So I hope I hope that kind of answers your question. So, oh no, I didn't answer it at all. I got off to the side. So what are some red flags in pricing? Yeah, okay. So now that we've talked about pricing, some of the red flags you might find is if you find somebody charging you $1,000 for a base price for a cover, you know, and that's just the digital one. And then you go and you think, okay, that's kind of going to be higher end. Let me go look at their portfolio, and their entire portfolio is one font over a stock photo. You're probably not getting your money's worth, not unless they're actually hand illustrating those photos. If you find somebody that's a really good price, it's in your range, and you're thinking, okay, I can do this. And then you go and look, and their artwork is, I don't want to say not up to par, but maybe it's something that you know from looking at industry books that it's not going to sell. You know, it's something that, or they've got crayon drawings on there because they really like to do the crayon art, which is great. Crayon art is great, but it doesn't belong on a book cover, you know, especially not like a science fiction. You don't want to have a crayon drawn spaceship. That's not going to get you in there. So that's the thing, is when you're looking at artists, you want to look at the price, and you want to look at, do they understand this industry? Do they understand my genre? Do I like their art? If everything's great, but you look at their art and it's just really not your style, then you're not going to get your money's worth. You're not going to be really happy with it. So the last red flag I kind of look for, and this is sort of a debated topic, is a lot of artists or book cover artists will say, okay, this is the price, you know, everything looks good, they've got some great art, and then they go, but you can only have 2 revisions. And then you have to pay for everything after that. That's when you kind of go, okay, well, what if I don't like the concept right away? Then I have to ask for that revision. That takes 1 away. And then all of a sudden, you know, I'm paying for 4 revisions because I really wanted to make sure we got those tweaks right. And I'm not saying that people that do revisions or have that built into their contract are wrong, but you definitely want to look at, does that work for you? Can you work with that revisions, or are you looking to work with somebody that's going to go, okay, we want to bring your vision to life. It's okay if we take a little while, you can nitpick it, you can ask questions, ask me about the industry, ask me why I chose this color, and they're really willing to work with you. So hopefully that kind of answers the question. All right, now everybody's asking where you can find my web and socials. I am at kjharrowick.com or authorkjharrowick.com. You guys can see my site here, and I will also drop it in the chat. Oh, the end of it. Yeah, let me share how it ended up. So this ended up being the final piece. As you can see, I've got sort of a focal point of the full image in the background, but just a piece of it and kind of faded back a little bit. And then I trimmed the front cover to fit into these, so it looks like these books are coming out. Alrighty, that's where I put my website up. You guys can find me on any socials at KJ Harrowick. And if you're, if you're interested, you guys can find me anywhere, come say hello. You can still continue to ask questions if you have them. I have a contact form on my site if you're curious about actually booking me for a project. I'm booked through July for my large web projects, but I do have small projects as well that I can do in between. If you are really not sure what you need, but you need, say, a cover or, let's talk. We can set up a meeting and just have a conversation. Or if you want any coaching with anything, I also do some coaching in certain areas. So you guys can contact me anytime. And did I miss any questions? I think that's it. You guys can find this video again. It's going to be on the WriteHive website. And I'm also probably going to break it into pieces and share it on TikTok. I've been dying to do that. And that's all I got. I'm here for you, whatever you need. Thank you all for coming. Kind of felt like I was talking into the universe for a while, but I'm so glad you guys had so many great questions and that you enjoyed the presentation.